Groups and teams, solving problems. When you think about teams, one thing to think about is they can't be avoided. So if you're like me, a lot of times you don't want to be on teams, and I have been in that situation at work a lot. But the reality is that you will be all the time, and so you need to take a good attitude towards it and to understand why teams exist. Teams are often used in concert with methodologies such as TQM and Lean Six Sigma in business. And nowadays, teams work not only face to face but also virtually. In fact, many cross functional teams have people from many different areas of the country in a corporate environment. So, for example, I used to work at a local supercomputer company, and oftentimes we had teams where we would have conference calls, webinars, that sort of thing, where we were working in concert with people in Houston, Texas, California, and Wisconsin all at once. Effective teams have clear goals. Oftentimes they'll have problem charters, charters that say, here's what the problem, here's what we're trying to solve. They have capable team members. It's important how to know how to pick your team in order for your team to be effective. You need the right people in the right positions. They need a commitment to excellence, and they also need to have some outside recognition. If a team is effective and does well, it's important to recognize that team. You have to have a collaborative climate. That should go without saying, but everyone needs to work in one direction for the team to be effective. And finally, and this can be the most important thing oftentimes, teams need the support of upper management. If the teams don't have the support of upper management, it's very unlikely that any solutions that the team brings forth will actually solve the problems. If you talk about teams, you talk about positive participation skills, and what this means is the first is accountability. You want to show up on time. People need to complete tasks. People need to be trustworthy, and they also have to act in the spirit of cooperation. That doesn't mean that people always agree on everything all the time. However, as you can see, they're respectful, they're enthusiastic, and they have a willingness to resolve conflicts. So in other words, if there's a problem, they just don't set their feet and become stubborn, but they work for resolution. When you organize teams, recruitment's important, and you need to know what to say to whom. So some of the skills that we've already learned about reading people's body language, understanding how to communicate is important. Need to train people on what is expected. What are we trying to accomplish so they know? Roles need to be identified. You want people to make sure that they understand what they're supposed to doing, what tasks they are responsible for, and also understand what others are so that there's not overlap or conflict. We want to select a meeting format. Are we going to meet once a month, once a week? How will that work? And then you need to determine an assessment method. So there have to be timelines, deliverables, that sort of thing to keep the team on track. Some problems with teams. The first and one of the biggest ones I would see in industry, and I worked in industry for about 20 years, there'd be too many people on a team. The more people you add to the team, the more likely it is that you'll have people who are not happy to be on that team or who have conflicts with others. You can have the wrong people on a team. Sometimes people are very good individually, good individual workers, but they don't work very well as a team, or they just don't have the requisite skills or knowledge needed to help the team out. Once again, the team doesn't have the support of upper management. A fourth thing is teams can be too willing to jump to solutions rather than understanding the problem. It's very important that you understand exactly what the problem is, what the root cause is, and that the team work together to provide a solution to that root cause rather than saying, let's see how fast we can solve this issue. Another problem with teams is people don't have the time or the willingness to commit to the project. Someone doesn't have time or they're not willing, don't put them on your team. Occasionally, other groups or people are working actively against your solution. If you're working on a project and it's going to step on somebody's toes, a lot of times that will happen. And then another problem, and a very important one, is that the team leader does not lead. If you are the team leader, it is your job to make sure things are organized, conflicts are resolved, and the team keeps on track. If you think about problem solving in groups, you need resources. You need to be concerned with accuracy, and when you have groups, you're more likely to catch errors. You need commitment, and the members are more likely to accept solutions they help to create. So if you have a team, and one thing that I had an old boss, and what she would do with people who had complaints is she would put them on a team to resolve said complaint. That way they had commitment, they had skin in the game. It's also important when you think about groups, and one advantage groups have is there's diversity. There's different ways of looking at things, and that can help solve problems effectively. Another thing is, and the reason you would have a group or have a team is a job is beyond the capacity of one person. Tasks are interdependent. So what that might mean is it requires engineering, it requires design, it requires people who are on the floor all to work together to solve the problem. Groups are best suited to tackling problems that do not have a cut and dried answer. If you have a single solution problem, it doesn't necessarily, could, but doesn't necessarily require a group. If you can just solve it easily with two people, solve it easily with two people. If it's something that is a problem that's going to require many different groups working together over time, then maybe a group is the way you want to go. And it's important, once again, problem solving in groups, you need the support of everyone. When you prepare to solve a problem with a team, groups are most effective when members feel good about one another. You want to build cohesiveness. Once again, smaller teams are better, and having complementary skill sets is important. So you don't need 4 engineers, you need 1. Generally speaking, you want to leave out strong personalities when possible. If you have multiple strong personalities in a team, particularly if they have different ideas about how to solve things, it can bog the team down. You want to utilize subject matter experts to inform the group. So people outside the team can be utilized to give the group information, but they shouldn't tell the group how to solve the problem. As I said before, there are a lot of problem-solving approaches that teams will use. Once again, you want to well define the problem. You want to analyze problems. You want to see what you want to accomplish. What are we trying to do? A lot of times that can be obscured, particularly over time. Gather relevant information and see where your resources and problems are, and then you want to develop solutions. There are a lot of different decision-making methods that you can employ in teams. One is consensus. Everyone supports the decision, or at least they can live with it. Another one's majority rule. Sometimes expert opinion. Who are the people who are most likely to give the right decision? Sometimes a few members of the group can decide. And then, of course, there's the authority rule, Cartman policy, for those of you that watch South Park. And basically that can be, I'm the boss, I make the decision. None of these decision-making methods are better necessarily in and of themselves. It depends on the problem, depends on the situation. The last thing I talk about are some of the dangers of group discussion, or some things, pitfalls of teams. There can be information overload or underload. You could lack information, or you can have too many things to consider. There can be unequal participation. Choosing team members wisely averts this situation. Sometimes you're thrown into teams, you can't do anything about that, but you want to make sure that you at least participate in a way that, is what you should have done. There's a pressure to conform sometimes with teams, within the team or without. And so what can happen is you get a watered down solution. And the last thing that I'll talk about relative to teams is beware the man or woman of infinite possibility. So the last thing I'll say about teams is there's nothing worse than someone who says, I'm just playing the devil's advocate here. Eventually you have to come to a solution, make a decision, and live with it.